How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
My fellow Americans, welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I am delighted to have you with me. Well, the President of the United States appears to be on the verge of mass prospective pardons. Preemptive pardons, if you will. That is, pardons for Tony Fauci and Liz Cheney and others who Donald Trump's team has said they want to investigate. They're just going to give a blanket pardon. Any crime you may have committed, you're pardoned. It's never been done in American history. And this gets to something I said yesterday. Completely uncoordinated, didn't know it was coming. But this gets to something I've said actually all week long. That Democrats in the media talk about norms and the shattering of norms, and you never hear them talk about the Democrats shattering norms. It's always the Republicans shattering norms. Democrats never shatter norms, only Republicans do. And those norms that Republicans shatter are things Democrats have put in place to preserve power when they are out of power. This is Jonathan Martin from Politico on MSNBC Today.
Shocking to even write this. The idea of offering people who have not been charged with any crime, there's no even hint of committing any crimes, pardons, because the nature of the incoming administration is such that they're pretty open about the idea of pursuing a kind of third world model of when we come in, we go after the old guys. Now, I can hear what the Trump folks are going to say immediately, which is he's only doing what they did to us. And I think, guys, that's what you'll hear next year if the Trump folks do pursue these revenge investigations or indictments of they started lawfare first. They indicted Trump left and right. We're only keeping the same thing going. And you can see it easily right now. And, guys, that's why this debate is so serious in the White House and why they're taking this, I think, with some measure of sobriety, even though it is an extraordinary precedent to set.
Don't you love that? Well, it's because, we know what the Trump team's going to do because we did it to them. They're essentially admitting now that the Democrats did engage in lawfare, and they don't want Trump to do it to them, so we're just going to hand out blanket pardons. Don't you love the subtle justification Jonathan Martin is trying to make as a supposed reporter and political columnist? You can hear it in his voice. He's trying to justify the thinking of the Democrats. This is Michelle Goldberg, the left-wing columnist at the New York Times.
Patel, who has published enemies lists. But one advantage of that is that he wrote a book. He has an enemies list in it. So we know exactly who he has threatened to go after without cause. Just pardon everyone on it. Pardon everyone on it.
And by the way, I don't think it's a coincidence that these are conversations happening on MSNBC. This is all MSNBC conversation. So here's what the White House is cautiously considering. They would take individuals Donald Trump or members of his team like Kash Patel have criticized and attacked, and they would hand them a pardon for any crime you may have committed. Any crime you may have committed. Now, we don't know what crimes they committed, if any, but this also does, you're going to understand, some people are going to presume that maybe they actually are acknowledging subtly that crimes were committed. Why hand them a pardon? And what the Democrats will say, well, is because it's costly. Even if you are innocent, it's going to be costly if they try to prosecute you. Now, you could sue them for malicious prosecution, perhaps. But that's hard to do, and it too is costly. So you've got this wild scenario shaping up where the Democrats are working now trying to justify a pardon of someone they claim did not commit a crime. But let's go back to this. Let's go back to this. Joe Biden just claimed that his own Justice Department, that Joe Biden is in charge of, Joe Biden's Justice Department, he believes maliciously persecuted, not just prosecuted, but persecuted his son. That's what they claim. If Joe Biden's Justice Department is persecuting Joe Biden's son, even though Joe Biden is in charge, maybe we really do need to clean up the system. And so maybe we really do need a Kash Patel. Maybe we really do need a Pam Bondi. Maybe we really do need a Pete Hegseth. Isn't it wild that, I mean, you've got Joe Biden claiming his Justice Department is prosecuting people? Where's Merrick Garland, by the way? Where's Merrick Garland? The left assures us it's a norm that the Attorney General is a separate and independent person, separate from the president and beyond the reach of the president. Where is he? Why hasn't he come out and defended the Justice Department? I mean, if that's the case, maybe we should allow individuals to come in and reform. If the Justice Department really is persecuting people as well, maybe Merrick Garland should resign. Why hasn't Merrick Garland resigned? The president just accused Merrick Garland's Justice Department of an ongoing prosecution and persecution of his son. So much so that the Biden team now believes they may need to give blanket pardons to people before Trump comes in. And you've got Jonathan Martin essentially acknowledging that what the Democrats did was lawfare against Donald Trump and that Donald Trump may do the same thing against them. It certainly seems that everyone wants to shatter a norm now, so shatter them. Becoming a banana republic is a choice, and it seems that both parties are choosing to become a banana republic, but we were told only the Republicans were. There's really legitimately no justification for a blanket preemptive pardon, and I question whether or not it's constitutional. I do actually question whether or not it is constitutional. By the way, dare I forget this? The United States Supreme Court ruled that presidents have immunity for their actions, and also those beneath the president are presumed to have immunity from prosecution for their lawful, legitimate acts and even their unlawful acts that were done in the service of their job, so long as there was not a clear court ruling in the past that what they did was unlawful. This goes to qualified immunity, you understand. Qualified immunity is a rule that essentially a police officer and even a government employee is immune from prosecution for having done something illegal if what they did that was illegal was not known to be illegal at the time. And the way this works is that if there's not a clear court precedent saying a cop can't do something, then a cop can do it, and moving forward, the courts will say you can't do that one either, but that cop who did it the first time has immunity because no one had told him he couldn't do it. This is essentially what the Supreme Court has said, and remember, the left says, oh my gosh, this could give the president the power to assassinate his political opponents. It didn't happen. Joe Biden did not assassinate Donald Trump. Think about the Democratic meltdown. You all witnessed it. You all saw it. You all heard it. The Democrats had a meltdown about the Supreme Court decision, and they willfully mischaracterized the decision to make it way more incendiary and unreasonable than it actually was. The role in the rule was very simple. The role in the rule was that the President of the United States gets immunity from the actions of the President of the United States, not done for partisan purposes, but because of the job. And if what he did in the job appeared to be partisan, it's okay. He can still do it. You have to distinguish the role between president as a political candidate and president of president. And the things that the president did as president were presumed to have immunity. And the left freaked out about that. What Joe Biden now intends to do is more expansive than what the Supreme Court did. Donald Trump, as a political candidate, can still be held liable for crimes. What Joe Biden is doing is he wants to say that if you work for me, you can't be held liable for crimes, even if they were done in your personal capacity. It's way broader than what the Supreme Court did, and that Supreme Court decision warranted an address by the President of the United States to Americans to denounce what the Supreme Court did. And now he wants to go further than what the United States Supreme Court did, and you've got Democrats egging him on. In other words, it's all about power. It's all about power. It's all about control. It's all about whatever preserves the power for the Democrats. It would be hypocrisy, except the Democrats aren't capable of hypocrisy. It would be remarkable, except the Democrats, they have no sense of shame anymore. I mean, these are people who can watch a CEO of a company who is a father and a husband be murdered on the streets of New York and say, this is good. That's what they could say. This is good. It's rather wild that this is where we are. Charles Haywood. Let me read you his Twitter bio. Operates the Worthy House. Says, I'm here to give you back your future, human flourishing in the coming post-liberal West. The hour is late and Moloch is within the gates. That's how he describes himself. What is the Worthy House? The Worthy House is tied into, in some capacity, some form of religious recommitment. The Worthy House offers writings that revolve around moving towards a politics of future past. In short, that means that most but not all writings are related in some way to reality-based human flourishing in the post-liberal future. Politics, in this sense, is viewed broadly and includes most of all history. The primary author and maximum leader is Charles Haywood. He uses the process of writing mainly to develop his own thoughts. Battle preparation. This is what he wrote. I don't generally approve of murdering people in the streets, nor do I know anything about the dead guy, but it's good and salutary if the very many guilty among our elite start to live in fear of expedited, unanswerable, and unexpected punishment for their sins. Wow. This is something, he runs a Society for American Civic Renewal. Listen to this. We foresee a nation building great projects of civil and cultural renaissance, a society with strong leadership committed to family and culture, a society that nurtures rather than rejects virtue, a society that seeks the good and the beautiful and abjures ideology. We are raising accountable leaders to help build thriving communities of free citizens who will reclaim a humane vision of society. And yet, this is a man who writes, I don't generally approve of murdering people on the street, nor do I know anything about the dead guy, but it's good and salutary if the very many guilty among our elite start to live in fear of expedited, unanswerable, and unexpected punishment for their sins. Really? That guy's on the right, by the way. We're dealing with a lot of broken people, and our political class is a festering group of broken people on both sides, each accusing the other of shattering norms and going beyond. But what's remarkable is we have an entire political class of people inside and outside of the press who denounced a United States Supreme Court decision that gave the president immunity who are now cheering on Joe Biden going further than the Supreme Court and cheering on someone taking into their hands the execution of a husband and father because he happens to preside over a company they don't like. We live in wild and crazy times. All I can tell you is there are a whole lot of people in America right now who really need to get outside and touch some grass and get off the internet. AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry. Everybody's talking about it. Billions of dollars invested, so buckle up. The problem is AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less like Uber, 8x8, Databricks, Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/Erickson, Erickson. That's oracle.com/Erickson, oracle.com/Erickson. Go check them out today. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. I got to read you again. This is mind-boggling to me. So the person who wrote this is would consider himself on the Christian right and is complaining that he had to delete it, that it was a perfectly worded, excellent piece. Those are his words. Actually, let me read you more precisely. I deleted my perfectly good and excellently insightful post. Here is his perfectly good and excellently insightful post. And I quote, this someone from the Christian right. I don't generally approve of murdering people on the street, nor do I know anything about the dead guy, but it's good and salutary if the very many guilty among our elite start to live in fear of expedited, unanswerable, and unexpected punishment for their sins. If you actually are on the Christian right, God instituted government to serve as his judge and executioner. Individuals killing other people is not actually a Christian thing. There's this whole thing called the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not murder. The idea that you would have someone on the Christian right being just like the left, and they, by the way, they are woke right. The woke left and the woke right. The atheist James Lindsay actually submitted a piece to one of these woke right sites that believes in like Christian nationalism, and all he did was change the words of Karl Marx's writing, and he just changed the words from like the proletariat to the progressives, and they ran the whole thing as if it was his piece. He changed his name so they didn't know it was him, and it is they took Das Kapital and they ran it as if it was some insightful piece, and it was just Karl Marx's writings, and his like they were willing to run this. I'm telling you, the wokes on the left and the right are the same, and they are. They are the same disgusting group of people, and the ones who hide behind Jesus are the ones who are going to be judged the worst, I think. It's just wild that someone who can profess to be a Christian and then write something like this. Y'all, we need Hillsdale College in our lives more than ever because people are breaking down, and Hillsdale's so grounded in truth. They're such a great institution. Founded in 1844. They've been educating Americans where they are in all stations of life, not indoctrinating, but educating. They'd love to have you on board. Go to ericforhillsdale.com today. Watch their video, Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com. It's a great way to support me as well, and by supporting Hillsdale College. You go look at the video. It takes like 30 seconds. It's about their honor code system, what sets them apart, what makes them so unique, so distinguished, and then sign up for Imprimis. It is completely free. You get Imprimis for free. You want to take a cheap way out of a Christmas present? Sign up a friend or family member for Imprimis. Not only are you paying nothing, you're actually giving them something really, really good. ericforhillsdale.com, E-R-I-C-K. Begin a relationship with Hillsdale College. In all seriousness, they educate Americans wherever they are. They don't indoctrinate, they educate, grounded in the truths of this country's founding. ericforhillsdale.com today is where you want to go. Sign up with Hillsdale College, get Imprimis for free, learn what makes them so unique, and you will definitely want to support them. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I would be very happy to have you. I got to play you a little bit of an exchange from Nancy Pelosi, of all people, but it's relevant to something. Let me find. So I had the file open and then it disappeared, and now here it is again. Nancy Pelosi was getting heckled by code pinkers in the hallways of the Capitol.
We're here to talk about genocide of the Uyghurs. What about the genocide in Gaza? What about the genocide in Gaza?
Stop calling.
I just got back from Western China.
Well, we're talking about Gaza right now.
If you stop calling Uyghurs China terrorists and supporting President Xi as the oppressor.
We're asking you about the
I'm
genocide in
telling
Gaza.
you, it would be helpful. You would have more common ground to have a conversation if you stop calling Uyghurs terrorists. That's what people do.
Nobody calls I never would call a Uyghur a
I've
terrorist.
heard them.
Well, what about the $680 million that Biden is now calling to send to Israel? Is that something that maybe you could help us stop?
We're here to talk about the Uyghurs and you call terrorists.
Well,
We do not call Uyghur
We
terrorists.
have nothing in common with you.
Yeah, well, what about...
Nothing in common with you.
We're against genocide wherever it is. We're against genocide in
They're
Sudan.
funded by the Chinese.
If we're
Now, listen, I got a lot of issues, as you know, with Nancy Pelosi. But she's right to point out Code Pink is funded by China. And they want to distract from a congressional investigation into what's happening to the Uyghurs in China. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Uyghurs are a Muslim minority in far western China. And there is evidence the Chinese have stepped up their genocide campaign against them. Here's what the Chinese do to the Uyghurs. The elderly have their Qurans confiscated from them. Their mosques have been turned down. And if they mention Allah, they are placed in concentration camps. The Chinese do this to Christians as well. The difference between the Christians and the Uyghurs is that there's Western Chinese provinces are home to the Uyghurs. In China, anyone who is a Christian has been converted to Christianity. The Uyghurs are actually a province that was absorbed into China that was predominantly Islamic. And the Uyghur elderly are put in concentration camps. The middle-aged are sent to re-education camps. And the young are removed from their families and sent to work in eastern China in the factories that build our electronics. They are completely pulled away from their families. There is evidence that the Chinese have begun essentially killing the elderly Uyghur families. They are deprived of health care, and they are deprived of social credit scores to be able to buy food. So if they can't live off the land and they live in a desert region, they die. There's a growing evidence the Chinese are doing this. Congress is looking into it, and Code Pink, of course, only wants to talk about Gaza. So Nancy Pelosi's response is, you're funded by China. You're funded by China. But it's not just the Uyghurs. So one of the necessary metals for producing weapons is gallium. Gallium is a element. You know what an element is? It's in the periodic table. It is a pure substance. Its symbol is Ga. Its atomic number is 31. It's a soft metal. In its liquid state, it becomes silvery white if enough force is applied. It can fracture. It was discovered in 1874. It is crucial in semiconductors. Gallium is used in a lot of electronics. It's used in high-speed switching circuits. It's used in microwaves. It's used in microwave circuitry. It's used in pharmaceuticals. China is the biggest exporter globally of gallium. Over 90% of gallium is produced in China. China has now banned the export of gallium to the United States. 90% of China, 90% of gallium is produced in China. And 80 to 95% as of July 2023, just looked it up. 80 to 95% of gallium is produced in China, and China has now banned its export to the United States. Why? Because of the CHIPS Act. The CHIPS Act is a big government boondoggle that requires the making of microchips inside the United States. They are more expensive to produce inside the United States, and we're required to import gallium from China, and China has now said they will not allow imports of gallium into the United States. Guess what? By the way, you should also understand, China has bought up the mines, the gallium mines around the world. China has bought a massive amount of mines around the world that produce gallium. In fact, they've outbid American companies and European companies to ensure that the Chinese win out on the land rights to mine the gallium so that China can control the supply. And now they've said, sorry, we can't send any to the United States. For perspective, let me give you two numbers here. China controls up to 95% of the supply of gallium, and 98% of the gallium in the world goes into semiconductors. And China said none can come to the United States. But guess what? We're in luck. We're in luck, people. There's a silver lining, a gallium lining to all of this. Miners in Montana have just discovered the largest mine of gallium on planet Earth outside of China. In Montana, they found the largest deposit of gallium outside of China. So the Chinese have said no gallium can come to the United States, and now we have found the largest deposit of gallium outside of China, and it happens to be in Montana. You will not be surprised to learn that environmental groups have descended upon Montana with lawsuits to stop the mining of the gallium, claiming there will be massive environmental impact. I played you the clip from Nancy Pelosi about Code Pink where she says you're funded by China, because who do you think is funding the environmental groups? Who do you think is funding the environmentalists? This is an old Soviet tactic that the Chinese have adopted. I've said this before. It needs to be said again. New people listening to the audience, it's worth reminding you, when the Soviet Union fell and Boris Yeltsin became the president of the Russian Federation, Boris Yeltsin allowed Americans into the KGB archives. One of the things we found in the KGB archives is that Ted Kennedy, then a senator, the son of John and Robert, or the brother of John and Robert Kennedy, tried to get the Soviets in 1984 to interfere in the American presidential election to benefit Walter F. Mondale, the Democrat. He wanted to stop Ronald Reagan. He wanted to get the Soviet to make some peace concessions that could undermine Ronald Reagan, and wrote a very explicit letter to them saying you could get Walter Mondale if you did these things. One of the revelations, it's always been downplayed in the media. No, you're misinterpreting. No, it's very clear what he wanted to do. He wanted the Soviets to interfere. When all the 2016 allegations came up about the Russians trying to steal the election, that Donald Trump was an agent of the Russians, we're like, hey, look at what Teddy Kennedy did in 1984. And the media was like, how dare you accuse our Saint Theodore Kennedy of doing that? But it was true. One of the other things we found in the Soviet archives of the KGB is how so much of the environmental movement of the West and the anti-nuclear movement of the West was funded by the Soviets. The Soviets was backdooring money into major Western environmental organizations to protest the development of nuclear power plants and nuclear missiles and industry that could build up the Western military reserves. You know, and I know, China is doing the same thing It just cannot be a coincidence that China has banned the export of gallium to the United States. We turn out to find a massive deposit of gallium in Montana, and environmentalists, well-funded environmentalists, descend on Montana saying, you can't drill it, you can't get this out of the ground. And do you know that the Biden administration has been humoring the environmentalists as opposed to telling them, eminent domain, we're going to seize the land, we're going to extract the gallium. The Biden administration is humoring the environmentalists. The environmentalists are funded by China to undermine the United States. You know, one of the issues I keep bringing up on the show is how we can't build ships in this country rapidly. Union rules, labor rules, regulations, environmental impact studies, all that sort of stuff. It's not just the shipbuilding itself has slowed down. It's all the ancillary bureaucracy to it. The DOGE committee, the Department of Government Efficiency, if they could just get rid of the regulations that make it impossible to build ships, we'll be able to compete again with China. It has been a systematic campaign by Democrats and environmentalist groups to fill up the United States with regulations to make it impossible for us to wage war, to make it impossible for us to rely on ourselves for our national security. And the Chinese have been funding so much of it. The Chinese are funding progressives who want to focus on Gaza and not the Uyghurs. The Chinese are funding Hollywood. The Chinese are funding the environmentalists. They're trying to undermine our national security using American citizens, willing pawns who hate the United States to do it. And the Biden administration is coddling them instead of fighting them, because too many of the Biden administration also do not want a strong and vibrant United States. They do not want a robust American military. They do not want a strong American military. This is where we are today. It's time to fight back. And one of the reasons they're desperately scared of some of Donald Trump's appointees is because those people will absolutely fight back. And a Republican Senate will confirm people willing to stand up to China in a way that Joe Biden's administration would not. I saw yesterday that Anthony Blinken says he wants to leave Marco Rubio in the best and strongest possible position on the world stage, and I thought, we are so screwed. That guy is too inept and too incompetent to do it. It's absolutely insane. We need to stand up to China, and that means standing up to environmentalists in the United States as well. One of the groups that's fighting that fight is Americans for Prosperity, standing up to the environmentalists, pointing out what they're doing, where they're funded, and how they're undermining our national security. They'd love to have you on their side. They can give you all the data, all the details. Americans for Prosperity. You can find out more at americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Sign up with AFP today. You'll become a more effective conservative activist who can fight for free markets and free people, who can fight for common sense conservative reform. They'll teach you how to go to your local government to advocate for things like school choice. They'll teach you how to go to your state government and advocate for, school choice and common sense conservative reforms on lawfare liability protections and reforming the way that trial lawyers try to shut us all down and hurt business and hurt families. They'll teach you how to advocate for border security reform, how to have a robust border. They give you all the information so you can either educate your neighbor or educate your state legislature, or just educate yourself. All you got to do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer, americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Sign up with Americans for Prosperity today. I'm a big member of theirs. I'm going to Salt Lake City in 2 days to give a speech for them. Those of you listening to me in Utah, you may see me at the event on Saturday. Well, you will if you show up, because I'll be there. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Sign up with AFP today. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I would be happy to have you. Senator John Thune is the new Senate Majority Leader, will be as soon as January 3rd. He's the Senate Republican leader, and he has just released a calendar for the 2025 United States Senate. The senators, for the first time in a very long time, will be required to work 5 days a week. I know, it's wild. The Senate under both Chuck Schumer and his Republican predecessors, going back to the late 90s, chose to work 3 or 4 days a week. John Thune intends for the Senate to be in session every day of the work week, for all of January for the most part, minus the 1st and 2nd. Most of February, all of March except for 1 week, all of April except for 2 weeks, all of May except for 1 week, all of June except for 2 days, all of July except the week of July 4th. 1 day in August. August is the traditional month of recess in Washington. All of September except for a week. All of October except for a week. 2 weeks in November. 3 weeks in December. That's actually the most days in Washington the Senate will have spent in about 2.5 to 3 decades. But in announcing this calendar, it's also kind of a signal the President of the United States won't be able to recess appoint anyone. There's going to be other than August, there's not going to be enough time on the calendar for the Senate of the United States to be in recess so that Trump can get his cabinet. In fact, I'm seeing, as a matter of fact, the number of Trump supporters who are complaining that there won't be any time off for recess for the Senate to be able to go away so Donald Trump can recess appoint any of his picks. Just making nobody happy, but daring to actually get work done in the United States Senate. That's actually a good calendar. It's a good, productive calendar for the United States Senate. It's good to make those old guys work. Maybe some of those guys will decide, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. So they're going to stand down and go away. That would actually be really good if the Senate of the United States decided to get some of their guys to resign or retire for the audacity of having to work hard.